guys, welcome to Two Guys and Hockey Talk. How you doing, Pavel? Welcome back for another week.
Happy one day after Valentine's Day, Evan. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing sweet. Get it? Sweet. But not quite as sweet as tonight's show shall be. Oh, I thought that was your liner, dude. You're too busy doing the work behind the scenes, I guess. All right, everyone. Well, hey, guys, thanks for joining us here at Two Guys in Hockey Talk every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as well as at the Sports Empire Network and on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe just so we are on the Tiki channel. For those of you that are in the United States, you can check all things if you go over to Sports Empire Network. Working with, thank them for our partnership and all those guys that come out and join in. So, hey, Zale, great to see you. Hey, woohoo. Yeah, Pavel, what's with the horns? Zilster wants to know right off the top.
The horns? Oh, these, yeah. Well, my hair's just getting wild now. And as you can tell, maybe we'll do a charity thing and you can shave my head, Evan, after you grow a beard. Or we can take my hair and give it to you as a beard, one of those like fake lumberjack beards. But I'm doing good. The horns, I'm just bringing out my best New Jersey Devils, Zilstra. That's what I'm doing,
All right, we're at. Oh, my goodness. Are you ever getting commands tonight? All right. Well, as we promised last week, we are happy to have back this week Glen Ringdahl. It's a pleasure to introduce you tonight. You are a past president, of course, of the BCHL Chilliwack Chiefs. Woohoo! Back to Chilliwack. Actually, one of our followers, Zilstra, is in Washington trucking tonight, and she actually is over in Chilliwack as well. Lived there for many, many years with a lot of the other family members. But just so you guys know, not only is he's also the past president of the BC Lions, 2 times I found out in the conversations. He's done work with the BC Lions, and now he is on the alumni, the Vancouver Canucks alumni. And as well, he is a former vice president of the Vancouver Canucks. And we like to talk a lot of business around hockey tonight. I am so happy to have you on tonight. Thanks, Glen Ringdahl, for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Rev. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm sorry that it didn't work out last week. But I'm sure the anticipation has just grown universally. So. We'll have some fun tonight.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, especially if you love stories, tonight could be a great story night. So first of all, thank you again for coming. We're very honored to have you on with us tonight and for taking the time and also trying to get back on this week, even though last week didn't work as well. So it's okay. We just kind of, as they said, shot the shit. And we talked a lot around All-Star Game and everything else. And the next thing you knew, we were already an hour into our show, and we were okay, Glenn, without you for 1 week. 1 week, but we needed you for tonight for the stories. So I was going to ask you, I know when we were talking off air, you were talking about, because I was going to say, what got you passionate about hockey? And you had a different answer because you said you're not really into sports, but you love sports. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about what you mean by that.
I often say that I'm not a hockey fan, but I'm a big fan of hockey, and really of sports altogether. When you're doing a little rundown on things I've done, I was also the president of the Vancouver. They were called the 86ers there. Now they're called the Whitecaps again. But in professional soccer, we took that over when I was running the BC Lions football club.
Oh,
for Mr. Braley, and I happened to be at a dinner, a sports dinner night, and it was the very night that the fate of the professional soccer club in BC was going to be settled, because if the UBC didn't take it over from the past owners, it was going to fold, and they were going to send the franchise back to the league.
Oh, my goodness.
So I knew nothing about it, but because Carl Valentine was there, and he was a big star in soccer here, and he was the coach of the team at the time. And so I managed to get from him what the situation was, and he said, "Well, if we don't get it solved tonight, it's curtains for soccer." And
oh wow!
as the night went on, our host, John Rikichi, came up to the mic and said, well, I have bad news for you. UBC has turned it down, and so that means the end of professional soccer in British Columbia. I thought, well, that's just horrible. I know how popular soccer is, how important it is to, especially the young people.
Yeah.
So the next day, I phoned Mr. Braley, who owned the BC Lions, of which I was president at the time. And I said, would you mind if I investigate the possibility of us maybe taking it over until we could get it into the hands of people that really care more about soccer than we do?
Yeah.
And Mr. Braley had the same kind of attitude about sports that I do. And he said, okay. And he came back a little bit later and he said, okay, here's the deal. You can buy it because you can get it for nothing. Just take it over. And he said, as long as I don't lose more than $50,000 a year, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
So I said, okay, that's a deal. So I investigated a little more, and the only guy I knew in soccer, period, was Bob Lenarduzzi. And Bob Lenarduzzi is Mr. Soccer in Canada, really.
Absolutely.
And just a most wonderful guy. And so I said to Carl, where's Bobby? What's he doing? He said, well, he's coaching the national team at the moment, but that's probably not going to last a long time. I think he's on his last legs there in that job. So I phoned Bob and I talked to him, and he said, well, if something could be worked out, because I'm under contract to Hockey Canada, I'd be interested in coming back and working with the team. So then I phoned the head of Hockey or Soccer Canada, and he said, well, that might just be perfect. He said, matter of fact, Bob's work is now done, but his contract's still got about 4 months to go on it. So what we would be prepared to do is to continue to pay him for the next 4 months, but he could come and start working for you guys. So it just really fell into our laps. So he came out. He and Carl Valentine put together a program. We ended up with a heck of a team and really did quite well. Sold the team 3 years later for $300,000. So Mr. Braley not only got all his money back, we got a real nice interest payment on it as well, and we put the soccer team into the hands of people who cared about soccer.
Oh, that's so cool.
Story number one.
No, we love it. We love it. Evan, do you want to go next, or do you want me to?
Yeah, you go ahead, bud.
All right. Well, it sounds like you have a real good passion for that business side of sports, whether it is hockey, which is primarily what you're known for, but also soccer, amongst other sports. And there is a whole world there that people sometimes often forget, that there is a business side where, it's dollar in, dollar out, as you talked about investments. But with that, could you speak a little bit about your leadership and philosophy when going into the mindset of running a sports organization and what that looks like? The example that often people will point to is Lou Lamoriello in New York. And, he has this philosophy of players can't have beards or facial hair, right? Which I would never fit in. But just your thoughts of leadership and philosophy of how you approach this situation. And I'll have a follow-up after, but I'll let you answer first.
Well, yeah, the truth is, as I said, I'm not a hockey fan, but I'm a fan of hockey. Really, because I know how important sports can be in a community. Certainly to the individuals that are engaged in it, how they play, how they learn to play with others, work with others, if you will, how they can deal with their coaches and all of the mechanics of the sport that they're in. But also they end up representing a much bigger community. It might be just I'll call it their village, or it might be an area, the Lower Mainland, or it might be all of British Columbia, or it might be all of Canada. But you end up with a jurisdiction that you represent when you're on a team in a league. And so, yes, I cared very much that we did our best to not lose money, because somebody has to pay the bill, and so there's always a person who feels the way I do, I guess, but happens to have a lot of money. I'm not the guy with the money, but I knew people with money, and so we were able to put together the kind of operation that was affordable for those people, but yet accomplished the job, and always in pursuit of excellence. It was very important to me that we had programs that were intent on winning. I wasn't content that we would just have a football or a hockey or a soccer team that participated. I don't believe in participation ribbons, but that they strive to win and to bring a championship, if you will, to your area and to the sport that you're involved in. So there was definitely a pursuit of excellence, and one of my jobs would be to put all of the elements of the team and an organization together. So that would include not just the players, but the coaches, maybe the medical side, maybe the ticketing side, whatever, all the different parts of it, to try to make them all work with a purpose of being successful. You don't make it all the time, particularly in these amateurish sports. You don't make it all the time, and you sure as heck don't make it in sometimes in the big leagues. In the years when I was in charge of the Vancouver Canucks, we didn't make money ever, anywhere near it. But the idea was you tried to do the best you could for the owners so they would lose as little as possible and still have the greatest opportunity for success in winning, and therefore garnering more support from ticket buyers, sponsors, advertisers, supporters of all kinds, and build a really good organization. We were lucky in hockey because we had the Griffiths family, and that's exactly the way they thought. Mr. Griffiths, Frank, really put a lot into it. I remember one time we were going through a real tough time. Things were not going well at all. And the fans were getting more and more discontent. And I remember walking out one night after another bad game, and some guy yelled. I was walking beside Mr. Griffiths. I wasn't with him, but I was just walking beside him. And some fan yelled out, "I'm sick and tired of wasting $20 a night on this junk." And Mr. Griffith says, "Well, I'm sick and tired of wasting $50,000 a night on this junk. We're going to do something about it." And,
it's true, though.
Yeah, and that is the kind of money he was losing. And
wow.
And it just wasn't satisfactory. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So two important things happened at that time. One is we decided we had to improve our personnel, team, coaches, the whole work. Certainly the coaches.
That's good. That's fantastic.
And so we
there's a lot more.
We made a decision to significantly raise the ticket prices. When I say significantly, I mean like 25% raise.
Right.
Somebody had the bright idea, and it wasn't me, and it was a really good idea. Before we went to the public and to the ticket holders and the fans, we called in the media, and we said to the media, "Here's the situation. This problem has to get solved. And one way it can get solved is by getting a lot better personnel, and that means more money. Should all that money come from Mr. Griffith's pocket, or should it come partly from the rest of the partnership, i.e., the fans?" And we're of the mind that they should share in it. And if they're ready to make the commitment, then Mr. Griffiths is prepared to make the big commitment. And so we got the media understood that argument. And so when we announced it, you didn't have the media just picking you to pieces about all these greedy buggers are taking all the fans' money. No, they were supportive. And it went through like that. And nobody complained, because as soon as that was announced, the next thing that happened is we started to make some improvement. We made some significant player trades, and that led to the hiring of Pat Quinn as the general manager, president, and even head coach at some point.
That's fabulous. Just so you know, our co-host Pavel, I don't know if you noticed, it's like he was interrupting you in the middle of your story. I think he got lagged behind by the virtual reality of the internet. So I booted him out. He'll be on his way back in a few. So, so what I was gonna ask you then is, so as a vice president, when you were serving, oh, there we are. We'll bring him back in. Are you back in, Pavel? Are you with us?
Oh, he got his hair combed too.
Yeah.
It looks good now.
Can you hear us, Pavel? No, he can't hear us. So we'll just talk without him, Glenn.
Let's talk about him.
Yeah. So, as vice president of the Vancouver Canucks, maybe you can just give people an idea. Obviously, the roles change now when it comes to salary caps and stuff like that. Yeah. But now having a salary cap, it changes. But what business were you working on behind the scenes back in the day when you were vice president?
Well, the marketing side. My title was Director of Marketing and Communications.
Okay.
And it wasn't originally. It was called Promotions and Communications, because there was a marketing director. But not that long after I started, the fellow who was the marketing director chose to leave to go into another business. And so because I was already sticking my nose into it a lot, and I'd done a fair amount of the marketing activities at the BC Lions prior to it, before Arthur hired me, he said, well, why don't you just take that on too? So then I had marketing, communications, and of course promotion under. So my job was to deal with everything from tickets, merchandise, public relations, events, public events, everything that wasn't hockey was mine.
Okay.
And so when Pat came, and that was a really big deal, and it was the best move ever made at the Vancouver Canucks. He set up our management group very simply. There was just 4 of us. There was Pat was the boss.
Yeah.
And then we had Brian Burke was the head of hockey operations. That was the best move. Yeah. I was the head of all the marketing and communication, and in the middle was the accountant. The guy who kept track. So the way we used to laugh about it was my job to raise the money, Brian Burke's job to spend the money, and Carlos's job to keep track.
Of the in and out.
We did everything with the blessing of Pat, which he organized the 4 of us, and sometimes Arthur Griffiths, who was the de facto owner, would join us, and we called that the management council. That's all it was. 4 people, sometimes 5. If you go into the Canucks office today, that same group is about 35.
Wow.
Anyway, maybe even more. I might even be later.
Wow.
Anyway,
yeah.
That's what it was. Then I had a ticket manager. I had a PR guy. I had a few people in there. Just as the hockey side had coaches and assistant coaches and trainers and medical and all that kind of stuff. But we made it very, very simple. And the bottom line was, how can we get better in all ways? And how can we lose as little money as possible? That's about the simple philosophy that we brought in.
Okay, so just to touch in on that, so dealing with the operations part of it, I believe in one of our side conversations that we had last week is that you had mentioned, so just like I'm welcoming Pavel back as my co-host, you welcomed Pavel, but a Pavel Bure. And you were sharing. So maybe share a little bit behind the scenes about your experience and getting him over, and like just kind of behind the scenes stuff that maybe most of us aren't familiar with, but we all love the guy.
Okay, well, yeah, I think most people do appreciate that us getting Pavel was through the work of Brian Burke.
Mm.
He gets virtually all the credit for pulling that one off, because it wasn't easy getting people out of there. And don't forget, we had already had the experience of Igor Larionov and Krutov.
Krutov wasn't a good experience, but yeah.
No. But the two of them came together, and so we had been through that process. Pat also had invited Mr. Tarasov, who was the head coach of the Red Army team for years.
Okay,
Kind of the godfather of hockey in Russia, over to one of our training camp one year. That was a heck of an experience. He lived up to all of the imagery that we have of those kind of guys. Like I was laughing there about my glass of gin here. Right? Of course, it's water. But Tarasov, he would drink that like vodka, and I mean straight down.
It's like water for them, right? So essentially, they're digging in.
Yeah, and so we had a lot of interesting stuff that happened around that whole Russian thing. But that's how Brian got ingrained into that group and got access. And so we helped Pavel get out of Russia. He ended up in California, and he was not yet committed to us, even though we were very helpful in that. And so it took some really good work and then a wise decision, I think, on Pavel's part to sign with the Canucks and come here. And I became very good friends with his father. His father came with him. A little sidebar. Most people have never heard of Pavel's father, but
was it Sergei or Vladimir?
No, Vladimir was his brother.
No, Valerie was the brother.
Valerie, yeah.
Vladimir was the father. Yeah. And
see?
And he when he was young, he was a swimmer. Remember? No,
he was in the Olympic Games, and there was an Olympic swimmer that he
a guy won 7 gold medals.
Mark something, I think.
Mark Spitz.
There you go. Spitz. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, who won the silver every time he won the gold? Vladimir Bure.
Oh.
So that was Pavel's dad. Okay.
Yeah. And we never heard of him because everybody talked about Spitz because he was winning all the gold. But yeah, he was a championship. His Pavel's mother was a championship ice hockey or ice
skater.
Ice skater. Yes.
Yeah.
So they were very sports oriented. So they were actually pretty well off in Russia, because if you're that kind of a hero, you get rewarded with a big apartment and car. So, but anyway, I became very, very, very friendly with the father. We had an awful lot of fun together. That's many side stories. But it was a really good thing. My wife used to give Pavel heck all the time because he never would eat his vegetables. We'd have banquets or parties or whatever, and all he would eat was meat. Nothing wrong with meat, but vegetable, it wouldn't hurt. So she used to give him heck, make him eat his vegetables.
It's pretty cool just to see the transition of like how or what conditioning or the idea, quote unquote, conditioning was in the 80s, 90s, and versus what it is now with how athletes treat their bodies, what they eat. So that's quite the story.
I think all of that speaks to the whole notion of how seriously we take our big sports now.
Yeah.
And it's not just a bunch of guys or girls out having fun playing a game they love. It was very serious. And not to say that years past there weren't organizations that did that, but all organizations didn't do it. nowadays all organizations do.
Well, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business for so many now, right? There's so much on the line. One thing that we talked about, which I didn't know, I'm glad we had some side conversation, was the fact that I told you out of all the Rockets to play in the NHL, my favorite was the Russian Rocket.
Right.
And then you brought something to my attention about how did he get that name, the Russian Rocket?
Well, I don't know how it was first thought of, but it came out as somebody was saying it, whatnot. So I copyrighted the name Russian Rocket, and so I actually owned it for several years. But I did it only to make sure nobody else did and did something with it, you know.
Yeah.
And when I left the Canucks, I signed it over to the hockey club, so they owned it.
It'd be interesting to see if they still have it, eh?
Oh, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. There's no reason for them not to. It costs very little money to maintain a copyright like that.
And before we go off the subject of Bure, maybe if you can just also elaborate. So it sounds like, so now God bless his soul, Gino Ojic, who is now passed. He sounded like he had quite the friendship actually with Bure.
They were really the best of friends. It was almost like a Mutt and Jeff thing. The two of them together, they were always together. One was big and strong, the other one was small and wiry.
And fast.
But they were always together, and I know they would have done anything for each other. They really loved each other. It was a great relationship, and it was so valuable for both of them because they both were outsiders. Pavel coming from Russia, and Gino having come from a First Nations community in Quebec.
Oh, that's right, Quebec, yeah.
Yeah, really quite foreign from being here in Vancouver and British Columbia. Yeah. So they had a common bond over that. Neither one of them could speak English. For them. But they gradually got better and better. And I don't know how they communicated at first, but they had a real bond that was very, very valuable to both of them.
I wonder if Pavel was just showing him a bunch of meat or taking him for dinners with meat-only dishes.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Gino was a wonderful guy. We had just a week ago last Saturday, we had the Celebration of Life for Gino put on by the Musqueam Band out here in Vancouver. They have a hall at Musqueam Reserve. And they invited the alumni, especially those who had worked or played with Gino. So there was about probably 20 of us there, and it was a wonderful send off for Gino. All of the major leaders of First Nations tribes across the country were there, including the Grand Chief for all of Canada was there. It's a lady, and she spoke. And several others of them spoke. A number of our hockey guys spoke. Dave Babbage, particularly on our part. And it was a wonderful send-off for Gino, who was a wonderful guy. We loved him. He would just sit and talk. I remember about, 3 months ago, something like that, I went to our suite. We have an alumni suite at the hockey games, and he and I sat together and talked for the whole game. Hardly even watched the game. Talk. As you can tell, I can talk. So.
Well, so I mean, you alluded to the fact that you're part of the Canucks alumni, and I'm wondering if you can maybe elaborate. Are you still involved at all with the organization now, or is it more just an honorarium and you just enjoy kind of chatting with the fans, schmoozing with them? You know, maybe season ticket holders, having conversations with management, things of that nature.
I have nothing to do with the management or the running of the club. I am. How I got involved was one of my good friends, John Grisdale. He's on the board of the alumni, and and we were friends because he was the president of the BC Junior Hockey League when I was running the Chiefs. And so we became very good friends there. And anyway, one day we were just talking, and he said something about the alumni. He said, "You're a member of the alumni?" And I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, nobody ever asked me." Oh, he said, "Well, we'll fix that." So the next thing you know, I got elected into being a member of the alumni. And then we started having talks about the difference between the elements of the alumni. There's the fun and games side of it, if you will, and the hockey and camaraderie and all that. But there's the business side where you raise money for important charities, and everybody's not good for everything. So
that's right.
We said, well, why don't we create a fund? One of the problems was if you gave money to the Canucks alumni, you couldn't get a tax receipt for it because that's not a tax receivable kind of organization. So we said, let's form a foundation as a offshoot of the Alumni Association that can get a tax exempt status and also can talk more to the business community of British Columbia, get them involved to create more significant events, to raise more money, create more awareness of the goodness, and help give the players who we call the stars of our past stars of the game, a platform to work in. And so that's what we're doing now. The organization's just 2.5 years old. We're getting it organized. We got some really, really good people that are working on it. Arthur was made a chairman, and I was made vice chairman of the foundation. Kind of the same roles we had when I worked for him at the hockey club originally, when he was the president and I was the vice president, and here we are back again. And Arthur is the most wonderful guy to work with and for. In this case, I don't work for him, but I work with him. And it's just a joy, and he has nothing but goodness in his heart, and he's got a lot of contacts, a lot of relationships that can be very beneficial to bringing the alumni back out into the public in a stronger way to help raise significant awareness and money for important causes.
Wow. I'm just so a question here that was brought up, which organization that you worked, sports organization, you mentioned the soccer, the 86ers, the Chilliwack Chiefs, the BC Lions. Maybe there was something we don't know about, but Zill wants to know, which organization did you find the most fulfilling in your position?
Oh, I would say the Canucks, because during that time that I was there, the 10 years that I spent there is when Pat was there, and it was the most developmental period in the history of that organization. The BC Lions had a success. They had some success when I was there, but they had some really good success in past years as well, and have been instrumental in football throughout the province. Bobby Ackles, who had been the general manager when I worked with the Lions the very first time, which was in the very early 90s, end of 70s, early 80s. He was the general manager. Then he went down and worked in the National Hockey League, National Football League for a number of years. And then after I left the BC Lions in 2001, he came back as the general manager. But he did an awful lot to spread the gospel of football to younger people. Creating things like the Orange Helmet Awards, where they recognize coaches and other professionals in amateur football throughout the province of Columbia. He did an awful lot of bringing that awareness and raising the profile. So he did a lot more than I did. I had more fun than anybody else when I was in football. We had the most wonderful time, I have to tell you. If I didn't drink before then, I sure did then. and it was, but always done in good fun and with some really wonderful people. During years before, not the second time I was there, but the first time I was there, the club was still community owned, i.e., it didn't have a corporate ownership. It was like a society, and the directors were all just business people from in town. Most of them quite successful, but they just loved football, and they were a real fellowship amongst those guys that ran the club. And I and the fellow who was the marketing director, Roger Upton, who turned out to be one of my best friends in life, we were kind of the worker bees that helped those guys. And we, along the way, we had so much fun. It was stupid. But
that's pretty incredible. I was going to ask, but Evan can jump in. You talk about this notion of community or village and just building those rapport with people, because you're working with a variety of people with different skills and backgrounds. What did it take for you to build those relationships with people? Because there was an article we read where it talked about you, as I indicated earlier, a bit of a schmoozer. You knew how to talk to people. You knew how to kind of connect with them. And it sounds like a lot of these people who you met end up becoming really close to you, whether friends or just really close in your life. How do you go about building that rapport with those people? And what went into that thinking?
Well, oftentimes in organizations like those sports clubs, you don't have people that are good with the talking, the gab. I love going out and talking to community groups, to the city, the clubs like the Lions Club or that bad choice of word. Kinsman or whatever, those groups in a town or city that are kind of the backbone of the community. Yeah, right. And so I didn't ever have a hesitation or an ability to get out and talk to them. And so I always felt that part of my job was to be the face of the organization and to speak about the values of sport and the values of having those kind of clubs within the community, whether it's the very local community or the bigger all of British Columbia or even all of Canada. To be able to enthuse people by having them participate in some way with these organizations, to me, was a real signal of success. And we had some really good luck. One of the ways you do that is through season ticket holders, but also just with other events. If you get involved in community events and your very presence brings people out, well, that's a good thing in my mind.
Yeah. Right.
I always thought that me and people that worked on my side of the business had a responsibility to make those events as successful as possible. And and they are. I know that's valuable. And also to participate in the actual structures. Like I mentioned John Grisdale as the president of the BC Hockey League. What a fabulous job he did in bringing the organizations up within their communities. We had 17 usually teams in the league. There are 17 towns that have a BCHL team where it's probably the most significant sports entity in those towns.
Yeah.
And so to get out and bring notoriety or fame to them is a good thing. And so I like to participate in that. And John was very, very good at that as well. Chris Hebb now is the commissioner, the president's commissioner. And he does a very good job too.
So
going get Evan on that not so good at talking aspect. So maybe if you have some classes or courses for him, he can attend.
So, by the way, Glenn, the only reason that he cuts in on those things is because he knows nothing about hockey, so he tries to talk about other stuff. So, hey, let me bring back to the Chilliwack Chiefs. So, one thing
he's got a nice shirt behind him on the wall there now.
There you go. Thank you.
I got one too, dude. All right, so one of the things that we try to do is try to bring a focus to hockey outside of the NHL, and we just touched a little bit around the Chiefs. And the reason we do is because we believe, again, that's the heartbeat of where everyone aspires to get to the NHL, right? You know, even in other countries, including a lot of Russians that might have their own local league in the KHL, which is known as the second strongest. We'll see what's going to happen after this war, though, how strong that league is. But coming back to the BCHL and the Chiefs, now I believe so one thing that was asked here was, were you a part of the Chiefs with the what I think it's called Prosper Arena or the
Prospera?
Yeah, were you involved in that in any way in helping bring that to get the building built? Did you have to?
Not to get that one built. A really good friend of mine, the guy I met through my work with the Canucks, Maury Keith. He owns the Duick, which is the largest. When Maury was a young man, he loved cars and did a lot of things with cars. His goal in life was to be the biggest Chevrolet dealer in Canada. Well, when he bought Duick, he became the largest Chevrolet dealer in Canada at the age of 36. So
wow.
You guys kind of, well, now what do I do? Anyway, he's done a lot. But I forget
the arena. The arena. We're talking about the arena. He was involved.
He built a new dealership. He had a rented facility where he ran his dealership on Marine Drive in Vancouver, and he couldn't come to terms with the people that owned the building. And so he said, "Well, the heck with you! I'm going to build my own." So he built his own new dealership down the road. And the guy that won the bid to do the building, the building company, was a guy named Jim Bond. Well, the two of them became the very best of friends and the very best of business partners. They are now partners in everything they do. And so one of the things they got involved in was building community facilities like this under the old P3 program, public-private partnerships. And so that was the first one that they built. It was in Chilliwack. They worked with the mayor at the time, and they built the facility on a 25-year deal, which is just about up. I think it's got like a year or two to go. And it's all
wow.
So they did that. And then I got involved with them again in 2008 or 9, when they had the opportunity to do another one in Langley. It's called the Langley Event Center.
Okay.
The Western Hockey League Giants Vancouver Giants play out of there.
So the Giants play actually in Langley? I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
They used to play at the PNE, but they didn't get along.
So who has ever gotten along with the PNE?
Well, you got a good point there. I'll tell you, I got a little funny story for you. So the decision was made mostly by Arthur, but on our whole, working together, that we weren't going to succeed working with the PNE because they just wouldn't give us a break on the rent. We were losing our shirts, and they were making money hand over fist. And they just said, "Oh, to hell with you! That's you guys are business people. You figure it out." And they wouldn't do it. So we actually got to the point where the decision was either they're going to sell the team, or they're going to move the team, or they're going to build their own arena. So that decision went through several significant discussions. And finally, the decision was made, let's build our own arena. And so that's how GM Place, now Rogers Arena, came about. And Arthur was the guy behind that. And what made it work, because that building cost, I can't remember, a lot of money. And even as good as big as the hockey club was, that's not enough to make it go. And that's why he went and got the Grizzlies of the National Basketball Association. And so then we were a 2-team facility. And then it worked. And he brought in some really, really good people. So
265 million in our dollars today, but back then it was 160 million.
Yeah, that's what rings a bell. Yeah. Okay, so that was fun. I never worked in that building. I worked right up until almost the opening day, and then I was done. And the reason was, one of the guys that Arthur brought in to work on the marketing of both of the building and the club. Now you got 3 entities instead of just one entity who's a renter. You got 2 clubs and a building that are all owned. Now that's a significantly bigger business. And so he had brought in a consultant from California to help with that. And he turned out to be a fabulous guy. His name's Todd Lewicki. And
Lewicki.
Yeah, he's one of the 3 Lewicki boys. And he did such a fabulous job, and he wanted to stay because they had the things he liked. He wanted to stay. Well, he would be marketing director. Well, I was already called marketing director. So guess what? Pat says, Glen, we got a problem here. we have 2 marketing directors and only 1 marketing director title available. What do you think? I said, I think it's Todd Lewicki. No question. I like to think I'm pretty good, but he's way better. And that was the opportunity, and so that's how I came to leave there. And
okay.
Today, Todd runs the Seattle Kraken.
Oh, yeah. That's why I actually knew. Yeah,
he's an owner, and he runs the thing. So.
Well. Hence, that's what everyone hopes, is that Seattle and Vancouver can build that rivalry in the future, right?
We haven't done anything about that yet, but I sure hope that happens. At least I haven't seen any of it. But I think there is some really good potential for that. Yeah.
Well, and it's the playoff, right? Once you get a couple playoff series behind you.
There you go.
So, okay, so we're getting into the last minutes, and I know our stories can take a little bit long, and we want to do that. So just something quick. So Zylstra brought up the roller derby community would benefit from your tutelage.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Just a heads up. Remember, the roller derby community. They would love your tutelage. So
if you don't have enough on your plate already,
if you want some more,
generous.
Yeah, Zill will set you up with the president. So, okay, so let's get to an interesting story. So back in 1988, who is now known as the greatest player to ever lace up the skates, almost everyone agrees, Wayne Gretzky. Yeah. He became available in a trade to the Los Angeles Kings, and Bruce McNall made it happen with the money, etc. Was Vancouver ever in on that discussion? Because lots of rumors, some things have been said out there. What can you tell us about the Vancouver Canucks wanting and trying to possibly get Wayne Gretzky into Vancouver?
It wasn't then, but there was a later opportunity for us to get Wayne. And it was when...
was it when he was a free agent?
Yeah.
Okay, so when he wrapped up his free agency in St. Louis, and that would have been then a few years later.
A few years later, who was the guy who became the owner of the McNall? No, not McNall. Okay. No.
Which team?
Vancouver Canucks. Not McCall?
Oh, Aquilini?
No, before that.
No, was it Bruce McCall? Was his name? Was there not a?
No, that's Bruce McNall. You're thinking Bruce McNall in L.A.
But you are right. He was only an owner for a short period of time.
Yeah, the McCaw. That's not McCall.
McCaw.
McCaws out of Seattle. They're big in the
Yeah.
internet phones and stuff like that.
Were they not also part of the Grizzlies into Vancouver?
Yes, they were.
John
Yes.
McCaw Jr.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
What happened there was Arthur had bit off more than he could chew.
Yeah.
And he knew that, and they needed a partner, and McCaw,
Yeah.
John, had been hanging around the Canucks for quite a while, and he wanted in, and so now Arthur's at the point where he needed money,
Yeah.
and so Mr. McCaw said, "Oh, I got money," and so he became a partner. Well, he became if I dare say out loud in public, not a good partner, in that his intent was to squeeze Arthur out.
Okay.
And,
I remember this.
But that might be a too tough of a word, but
Yeah.
the net result is he ended up with a lion's share of Arthur's shares because
Okay.
of the way the money flowed. And that isn't where we started the story.
Yeah, so talking about the possibility of signing Wayne Gretzky.
Oh, wait. So anyway, we have, that opportunity came, and so there was big discussions. And Mr. McCaw had a guy who was really a bean counter, and all of those of us who aren't bean counters in the world look upon bean counters as nothing but trouble.
Right.
And they usually are. That's the way we think. So anyway, they had a deal, and Pat was involved in it. Pat was heavy in the discussions and whatnot, and they said that they were going to put a deal together. So they put a deal together for Wayne.
Yeah.
And they ended up coming back to the Canucks with their last counter, said, "This is it, take it or leave it." And so Pat, Arthur, and a few other people were ready to pull it,
Yeah.
go. This accountant said, "We'll wait till morning." So they kind of tried it out, and they said, "No, it'll be an answer tonight, or not." No, he was doing brinksmanship.
Okay. Yeah.
And so they didn't get to do it. Next morning, when they went to talk, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's too late. You didn't come back, and we made another deal." Lost it by that much.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. My goodness.
That could have been a very, very significant.
So that was the story that your son-in-law told me to get from you, and I didn't understand because in 1988, Brian Burke shared in an interview that they were in on it to try and make a deal when they knew Wayne Gretzky was available, but Brian Burke in the end said we didn't have the money. There was just no way.
You mean the first time in '88?
Yeah. And so that was the only one I knew of, but this makes sense at the free agent signing because he was looking for a place to call, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow. That's a very interesting story.
It was a heartbreaker. Right? Yeah. And they said like Pat, and I don't know if you know this, Pat and I became the best of friends. So he told me some of these inside stories. And he said he was so mad he could have just ripped somebody's head off. And he knew who it was. And that same guy, that same bloody accountant, he's the guy who fired Pat.
Oh.
Here's Pat, the most successful hockey management guy ever to see this town.
Yeah.
And they made the decision to we're gonna let him go. So that accountant flew to where Pat was, which was something like St. Louis or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Was there, meets him. "Oh, what are you doing here?" "Oh, well, I need to have a talk with you."
Wow.
"You're out of here." Just like that. No discussion, nothing.
So the question came up: was Bure playing at that time? Would they have been line mates, or would Bure had already been traded to Florida?
No, he would have been gone by then.
Yeah, he would. Yeah. Okay, that would make sense. Yeah, because it was.
You should know.
I think that was. No,
Yeah.
well.
Get him, Pavel. Get him.
So
exactly.
So I got to tell you something, Glenn. We had a guy named Liam McGuire. He's a self-proclaimed, which he is really good, #1 NHL historian.
Yeah.
And we got him on our show. The first thing I did is asked him a question, and the question I asked wasn't really player related, and he says, "I have no idea." And so right away I tried to throw him some soft pucks, so he can line them up. Oh man,
there's a lot of stories in the sports world, and I've been very, very fortunate to be a part of some pretty exciting stuff over the years.
That's so awesome.
It's really cool because you guys, it was a time before social media where things didn't get out right away. It took a while before, a newspaper printed that story or reporters were able to get it on the 6:00 news. So it wasn't like instant Twitter.
Like now.
This is happening, an accountant ruined the deal for Gretzky, in free agency, because there would have been a ruckus in Vancouver as 2011 showed. So
well, it's actually funny because when you talk like even just Twitter alone, so back when Twitter was really getting popular, this is right around the time that Justin Schultz was going to be signing in Edmonton, and I was actually around a lot of the management, sitting only 3 rows behind, hearing the discussion that they had kept quiet. And so I overheard what was happening. I got on my Twitter and I actually put it out. And because I was 5 minutes behind somebody else that was one of the insiders, right? Everyone's just like, "Oh, you just copied off,"
Yeah.
It's just because it gets out there like instant,
Instantly.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, it's been an awesome time. Any last thoughts, Pavel? Any last questions?
I do want to ask you, Glenn.
Yeah.
You're a big proponent of BC. Both myself and Evan have been. It's a beautiful province. There's a lot of amazing places to visit, incredible people, as you are familiar and have connected with a lot of them. But any place you want to highlight in BC that people need to check out, whether an arena or a site that you're like, this is something that every Canadian or every person watching the show should see if they're visiting BC?
Well, I should say you should go play golf at Predator Ridge.
Okay.
Okay.
A guy that used to work with me, he worked under me, and then when I left, he took a lot of my job and did it even more successfully than I ever did. Ricky Thompson is the head of sales at Predator Ridge, and I get to visit him whenever I have a brother who lives in Vernon.
Okay.
And so whenever I go up there, I try to sneak in and see Ricky. One of the most successful and nicest guys that ever worked in sports. And now he basically runs Predator Ridge, or certainly the sales side of it.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it is a beautiful place. I played the course years ago, long before he was there. Haven't played it lately, but I'm gonna, maybe this summer, I'm gonna really try to get up there and play it. And I encourage everybody else to do the same, because it's wonderful.
We'll wait for our invites in the mail.
There you go.
Well, as is mentioned by Zil here, love hearing your stories, Glenn. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor, Glenn. Hopefully, if we get another chance, we'll do this again. And I like to say that our show tonight has been sponsored by Verhaeghe Law. And the reason I say that is because our lawyer is at Verhaeghe Law, Tim, and he has generously set up this interview and kind of preset this for us. So I really appreciate your son-in-law for doing that for us.
Well, I like the fact that there's a Verhaeghe playing hockey now.
Yeah, Carter Verhaeghe out in Florida. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Tim usually pronounces his last name as Verhaeghe.
Verhaeghe, oh.
But we call him Verhaeghe because it's more hockey-ish.
Okay, my wife's been arguing with me that it's Verhaeghe, so now I guess I'm wrong. It's okay. Pavel will not let me live that one down. So
no.
Well, as always, we're going into overtime. We always like to joke we should not be two guys in hockey talk. We should be two guys and overtime. Thanks again, Glenn, so much for joining us here today.
Real
Pavel, any last word?
No, we got to get Glenn funding us money for the two guys in overtime. And
there you go. There you go. Well,
but it's been an honor.
We got to do something that makes you famous everywhere.
But thank you. All the best. Everyone for tuning in tonight. Thank you so much. Remember to like, share, subscribe, give us a follow on YouTube, Twitter, and every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we are on. Glenn, we hope to have you back again on a future show. As Evan alluded, we appreciate your insight and the stories. Absolutely. They were fantastic. And Evan, final thoughts?
Thank you.
No, I just like to say, in the old famous words of Ed Whalen, it was a ring-a-ding-dong dandy. And in the meantime and in between time,
keep your sticks on the ice. Stay safe.
There you go.